You're deep in a new multiplayer game, everything's clicking, and your character's actions feel just right, until suddenly, they don't. There's been an update, and just like that, the game doesn't feel as fun anymore. You jump online to validate your suspicions only to hear terms like buff or nerf. Why? You come to find out that the developers made an adjustment to the game's balance. Balance is the backbone of good game design, ensuring that every choice and every challenge hits perfectly for players of all types and skill level. I'm college professor Nick Latray, and I'm here in my extended reality studio. And this is the art of fair play, rules, systems, and balance. So here's the tricky part. Balance isn't just about making sure characters aren't overpowered or underpowered. Designers also have to consider the rules and systems of a game and make sure that those are balanced as well. So how do you do that? Rules are the foundation of any game. They create structure, set boundaries, and define the possibilities within the game world. Think of rules as the physics of the game's universe. Let's take Hollow Knight, a masterpiece in how it balances its rules to create a rich and immersive experience. At first glance, the game's rules seem simple: explore, fight enemies, and collect geo. But when you dig deeper, you realize how finely tuned these systems are to provide a balanced challenge. For instance, combat rules are straightforward. You slash enemies with your nail, dodge attacks, and use abilities powered by soul. However, the game balances this by limiting your resources. Soul is both a tool for offense, like spells, and defense, like healing, forcing players to make careful decisions about when to attack aggressively or retreat and heal. This creates a constant push and pull that keeps every encounter engaging. Another key balancing act is the game's economy. Geo, the in-game currency, is vital for upgrades and progression. But dying means you drop your geo and must retrieve it from your shade, creating a risk-reward dynamic. Players must weigh the cost of venturing further into dangerous areas versus the potential rewards of upgrading their equipment. This balance ensures that every choice feels meaningful without ever becoming overwhelming. So, how did the developers of Hollow Knight create this balance? To achieve this level of harmony, Team Cherry, the developers, clearly spent significant time iterating on these systems. Balancing rules like these requires constant playtesting to ensure mechanics complement one another and don't overshadow the player's sense of agency. For example, they likely finely tuned the cost of upgrades, the amount of geo enemies drop, and the difficulty of retrieving your shade to hit that sweet spot where every death feels fair, but still punishing enough to matter. Next, take Mario Kart. In Mario Kart, the rules seem straightforward. Race to the finish line while using items to gain an advantage, or sabotage opponents. But what really sets the game apart is the ability to balance chaos and competition, ensuring every race feels exciting and fair, at least most of the time. A key component of this balance is the infamous rubber banding mechanic, also sometimes called a negative feedback loop, to help players of lower skill levels catch up. Players further back in the race are more likely to get powerful items like blue shells, bullet bills, or stars, while players in the lead get less impactful items like bananas or coins. This creates a dynamic where players in the back always have a chance to catch up, keeping the competition alive for everyone involved. However, this has to be used sparingly because it could get too frustrating for players who are punished for being in the lead. The developers at Nintendo achieved this delicate balance with a combination of playtesting, stats analysis, and thoughtful design choices. Rubber banding mechanics, for instance, are carefully tuned to ensure that they don't feel too punishing for skilled players in the lead, while still offering a fighting chance for those lagging behind. They likely use metrics to adjust item probabilities, determining how often and under what conditions specific items should appear. But what's so engaging about rules is how they can be broken or bent within certain limits. Think of the way Mario Kart introduces shortcuts or XCOM's high-stakes critical shots. It gives players a chance to use the rules in ways that surprise and engage. Here's a quick recap for aspiring designers. Balance rules are clear and consistent and make sense within the game world. For your own game, make sure that your rules serve a purpose within your core loop. Then consider where you might add flexibility to add depth and excitement. Test them to see where they work, but more importantly, where they don't. So, rules are one thing, but systems are where the magic happens. Systems are collections of rules working together to create complex, interconnected gameplay experiences. If balancing players was hard enough, and balancing rules is even trickier, then balancing full systems is truly a miracle. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Stardew Valley are both masterclasses in creating rich, interconnected systems. In Breath of the Wild, the cooking mechanic isn't just a standalone feature, it ties directly into exploration, combat, and survival. Finding ingredients becomes an incentive for exploring the environment. Experimenting with recipes enhances combat readiness, and the result of cooking helps you survive harsh conditions. Similarly, in Stardew Valley, the farming system connects to every aspect of the game. Crops generate income allows you to expand your farm, and expansion lets you explore new activities like fishing, mining, or raising livestock. These systems don't exist in isolation. They're designed to feed into one another, creating a gameplay loop that feels both rewarding and meaningful. So how do developers balance systems like these? Balancing interconnected systems requires a combination of iterative design, systems thinking, and clear player feedback loops. Developers use tools like resource flow mapping to ensure that each element in the system contributes meaningfully to the overall experience. For instance, in Breath of the Wild, the economy of resources like ingredients, weapons, and rupees is carefully balanced to maintain the challenge and reward loop. Players need to invest time and effort into acquiring these resources, but they're never so scarce as to create frustration. Another key technique is risk-reward balancing. In Stardew Valley, planting high-value crops like pumpkins takes longer and requires more resources, but yields a larger payoff. This incentivizes strategic planning and long-term thinking without overwhelming the player with complexity. Developers also rely on data-driven tuning, using metrics like average player session time, in-game economy fluctuations, and player progression speed to adjust system variables. For example, in Breath of the Wild, playtesting would reveal how often players cooked meals, how many ingredients they gathered, and whether the rewards from cooking felt satisfying. These insights inform adjustments to drop rates, recipe effects, or environmental distribution of resources. If you're designing interconnected systems, start by mapping out which system affects the others. Then ask yourself, does each element serve a purpose in the greater gameplay loop? Use risk-reward structures to create meaningful decisions for players, and always test how the systems interact under different playstyles. Finally, leverage player data and feedback to refine the balance, whether it's adjusting resource availability or tweaking the difficulty of specific tasks. By balancing systems with intention, you can create an experience where every action feels rewarding and purposeful. Balance is the cornerstone of engaging gameplay. Without it, even the most innovative mechanic or intricate systems can fall apart. Games like Call of Duty and Dark Souls demonstrate why achieving balance is both an art and a science. In Call of Duty, balance ensures that multiplayer matches remain competitive and rewarding. Weapons, perks, and map layouts are meticulously tuned to prevent any single strategy or loadout from dominating. Imagine if one gun were clearly superior to all the others. Matches would quickly become stale as every player would gravitate towards the same setup. Instead, developers use a combination of stats analysis and playtesting to keep the experience fresh. Every weapon feels distinct yet viable, creating opportunities for different playstyles to shine. Meanwhile, Dark Souls takes a different approach. Here, balance is about the tension between challenge and mastery. The game's combat and progression systems are designed to push players to their limits without crossing the line into frustration. Enemies are punishing but fair, teaching players through trial and error. The deliberate pace of stamina-based combat forces thoughtful decision-making, and even the smallest victory feels earned. La 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 la. Creating this balance isn't a one-and-done task. It's an iterative process that combines player feedback, data analysis, and creative problem-solving. For Call of Duty, developers might track stats like weapon usage rates, kill-to-death ratios, or map win percentages to identify potential imbalances. If a sniper rifle has a disproportionately high kill rate, they'll adjust its stats or mechanics, perhaps reducing its range or increasing its reload time. Then test those changes in a live environment. Dark Souls employs a different kind of iteration. During development, playtesters repeatedly tackled boss fights and enemy encounters to ensure that the challenge felt surmountable. Developers tweaked health values, attack patterns, and level layouts to maintain the game's signature difficulty while avoiding outright unfairness. This painstaking process is why Dark Souls is renowned for its tough but fair gameplay. So why does balance matter for designers? For players, balance is often invisible. When done well, it simply feels like the game is working as it should. But for designers, achieving balance is a deliberate act that can make or break a game's success. It's what keeps players coming back, whether they're chasing another multiplayer victory in Call of Duty or braving the unknown in Dark Souls. So how can you apply this to your own game? Start by defining what fair means in your game. Is it about creating fairness in competitive gameplay, as in Call of Duty? Or is it about creating a satisfying challenge, like in Dark Souls? Once you've established your goals, embrace the iterative process. Test your mechanics thoughtfully, gather feedback, and don't be afraid to make changes. Balance is rarely perfect on the first attempt, but with persistence, you can create an experience that feels just right for your players. So that's the magic behind rules, systems, and balance in game design. They may sound obvious, but mastering them is what makes the difference between a frustrating game and one that feels engaging and rewarding. Whether it's the boundaries you set with rules, the interaction of systems, or the fairness of balance, these core elements shape the player's experience from start to finish. Thank you for joining me in exploring these essential concepts, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with our game design series. I'll see you in the next one.